No, thank
I'm
you.
going to talk a little bit about our cleanups. Join us next June or October. There's a couple of our people out on the Farm River cleaning things up. Community water fun. It's a really great way to get together. This year alone, we removed about 2,400 pounds of trash, mostly plastic, out of the river. As you all know, having plastic hanging around in rivers in Long Island Sound creates all kinds of problems for fish and humans. So thank you to everybody that was involved. This is not a cabbage patch. This is a picture of invasive water chestnut last year where it had taken over a pretty big section of Page's Mill Pond. Page's Mill Pond is about 7 miles upriver from Long Island Sound. And it is so dense that no frog, turtle, wading bird, fish can utilize that habitat. So we've really taken the removal and the control of this invasive very, very seriously. This year, we were able to remove over 90% of it from the 5 locations where we know it exists. I'm going to start with Page's Mill Pond. DEEP was able to give us a grant after a lot of application process, and that allowed us to hire Sterling Aquatics, who's done a very good job. They've achieved 99% removal of that cabbage patch area and much more. We've also walked down the stream, Farm River below that. We've worked with a farmer, Dean Heath, at his farm pond, eliminated it there. Foxen Pond was a new discovery this year, number 3. And what we did there is had a big community day removal, which then inspired 2 residents in that location to follow up, and they went out after work. So between our one big blast and the 2 volunteers who lived there, we were able to control at least 95% and remove it. And then Vayusa Farm has been really terrific. They didn't have much of a problem, but we removed the few plants we found. So it was a very, very successful year. Together, I don't know why that's showing up on top. But together we were able to remove 90%. However, we're going to have to keep at this for 4 more years. It's just the way it is. And I'm going to give a little shout out to one person in our audience, Carolyn over here. Just raise your hand there, Carolyn. So Carolyn's already joined what we call our rapid response team. This year it was mostly board, but also Lindsay Suter helped out. That is a group that goes out when we find a problem with chestnut and spends the morning. It's really a very pleasant thing. So if you're interested in joining that, just put a little note on your sign up or text us. I shouldn't say text us. Send us a little chat that you're interested if you're on the phone on the Zoom right now. I'm now going to talk a little bit about our unified water study, which is in its 8th year of collecting data at the mouth of the river down in the saltwater area. We're now moving downstream. And this is all about examining the ecological health of the river itself. Can fish breathe there? Is there so much chlorophyll in the water that it's murky and creating problems in the river? Is there too much nuisance algae? Those are all the issues that we're looking at. And we've been doing it for 8 years. Save the Sound is our partner. Save the Sound organizes groups up and down Long Island Sound on both sides, 27 of them in Connecticut alone for 27 bays and harbors. And they did a great presentation at our March symposium on water quality. And this was the take home that the Farm River ranked 5th on the bottom out of 27. In other words, if you're looking at best to worst, we were 22nd out of 27. in terms of being best. So we're not really best at all. We're actually doing very poorly, which is a wake-up call to what we need to be doing on the river. This is all caused by excess nutrient, too much nitrogen, too much phosphorus coming into the system. And you're going to hear about beaver as a possible ally tonight to fight that problem. That's really a serious problem on Long Island Sound. Just to invite you to join the fun, we did everything from swimming around Kelsey Island to a big dance to bird walks to cleanups to a lot of fun on ponds and rivers. So join us in restoring and protecting our rivers. So with that, I'm going to now briefly, let's see if I can figure out how to get out of here. I think I can show. Okay. And are we now? All right. Skylar, I may need you just to help me get off of sharing the screen.
Question from Dave Topin, if you're taking questions.
Do you know what the question was? Stop sharing something.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Okay. I'm now going to introduce, we'll take Dave's question at the end, I think. Is that all right? I'm going to introduce Mike Callahan. I'm going to keep this very, very short. I got sort of curious about beaver because there's a lot of talk about them out west. But when I started asking the question, what about beaver in eastern systems like ours, Mike's name kept coming up. He's pretty much single-handedly put together his Beaver Institute. I really want to recommend the tremendous library that they put together on their website. But we're super lucky to have Mike here today to talk to us a little bit about how beaver may be an ally for restoring the Farm River and many other similar rivers here in the Long Island Sound area. So take it away, Mike.
All right. Thank you, Kurt. It's an honor to be here, and I look forward to talking beaver with you guys. So I'm going to try sharing my screen here. Just bear with me. Let's see from the beginning. All right, can you see that okay? Okay. Yeah, so as Kurt mentioned, I've been working with beavers for quite a while here I'm in Western Massachusetts. We also do some work in Connecticut too. And to date, with my company Beaver Solutions, since 1998, we've resolved over 2,000 beaver problems. And then in 2017, I started the nonprofit Beaver Institute, which is a national organization that trains people to do this work across the U.S. and Canada, and otherwise educate people about the value of beavers. So I have two beaver hats, which I wear interchangeably. Those are the websites for both organizations. So tonight, we're going to go through some of the basics about beavers and their history, and also what the benefits and how beaver activity actually helps build climate resilience. And also, no talk about beavers is complete without talking about some of the issues they can cause, and also the solutions that we have for them. And then I'll leave you with some resources, and we'll have a chance to have some chatting and a Q&A. So without further ado, let's get into some basics about beavers. Their scientific name, Castor canadensis. Adults get to the size about medium-sized dog, 40 to 60 pounds. They're well adapted to the water, which is why they like to build dams and turn small streams into big ponds. And they're strictly vegetarian. Some people think that they eat fish. They don't. They'll eat the bark of sticks and the cambium layer, as well as other vegetation like cattails, water lilies, ferns, grasses. So beavers, prior to Europeans arriving, were across pretty much the entire North American continent. And this map actually underestimates a little bit where they were, but you get the idea. They were pretty much they're very adaptable, so they're in pretty much every stream across the country. But then Europeans came in, and all millions, up to 200 million beavers across the continent were pretty much decimated by unrestricted trapping because Europeans were infatuated with the fur that made the best felt for top hats and other things, and they had wiped out all their beavers. So beaver pelts actually became so valuable they were used as currency. And the trappers actually preceded most of the settlers. So when the settlers came in, places that had been wetlands but maintained by beavers for millennia were drained out, and it made great farmland and places for humans to live until beavers came back, which in Connecticut was more, around the turn of 19th century. So they came back because furs were no longer as valued, and a lot of the land that was cleared for farming and drained has reverted to forest. And so the habitat and the pressure of unrestricted trapping contributed to them coming back. As I mentioned, they're very well adapted to the water, very thick fur, lips and eye double lips and eye double eyelids that help keep the water out when they're swimming or carrying a stick in their mouth, web feet, a tail they use as a rudder. They can close their ears when they're underwater, and their heart actually has adaptations. They can hold their breath for up to about 15 minutes under the water. So they build these dams because they've been around forever when there are a lot of predators, and the water affords them safety as well as a way to transport woody materials and be safe while they do it. The Farm River watershed, I'm told, really has few, if any, beavers in its tributaries, which surprised me. But I can assure you that there are a lot of beavers in Connecticut, and beavers do travel. The young ones move out to find new habitat, so it's only a matter of time before you start spotting beavers, I'm sure, in your watershed. The they build these dams I mentioned to for their own purposes, but because they've been around for millennia, a lot of other species have adapted to them, and we'll talk about that more shortly. But beavers want water, and so they're second only to us humans in changing the landscape to suit their own needs. So they're very good at what they do. The dams they build are incredible. I mean, I'm a little over 6 feet, so you can imagine, how big this dam is that they built with no tools, just their hands and their teeth to cut down the trees. And they don't have much else to do. So, if people tear down a dam, the beavers will generally build it right back up that night usually, because they're primarily nocturnal. They'll occasionally come out during the day. But these dams, because a lot of other species have adapted to them, have a lot of benefits. And when they turn a small stream into a large pond, that water seeps into the ground and it recharges our aquifers. It maintains the water table, and they generally make a series of dams, and those dams act as speed bumps for big storms. And we'll talk more about that with climate changing. And with less peak flows, there's less erosion in the streams, and the water downstream of these dams is cleaner and cooler because a lot of the water that goes in the ground cools and cleans and then comes back to the stream and flowing downstream. So, as Kurt had mentioned, a big issue in this watershed is nitrogen and phosphorus getting into the bay and increased bacterial levels. And when beavers build dams, it's typically in the smaller order streams, the headwaters and the smaller streams. They're not going to build a dam across the Farm River itself, because it's just not feasible. But making, a dam out of wood and sticks, but by affecting all the water that feeds into the river, it helps the river and helps everything downstream. So beaver ponds are known as called the Earth's kidneys because of the effect that they have of filtering, cleaning the water. And we can go into more detail in the Q&A, but there are various biological and physical ways where the runoff of the nitrogen and the phosphorus or heavy metals or things that are in the water, pollutants, will be taken out of the water, and cleaner water is starts flowing downstream. And by slowing the water and sinking the water, erosion, any sediments that are in the water help settle out. So these beaver ponds actually decrease the sediment load that ends up going down into the rivers and the bay. Now, with climate change, we all know we're having more large storm events, more hurricanes coming up the coast, rising sea level, temperatures rising, affecting all kinds of species. Out west, wildfires, as we all know, are a huge, and in Canada, a huge issue. So, beavers can't stop all that, but what they do can help a lot of those things. So how is that? How can beavers help decrease some of the climate damage we are experiencing and will continue to experience? Well, as we know, beaver dams spread, slow, and sink the water, and that has a lot of ramifications. One of the ramifications, obviously, is that, as I mentioned, we're sinking water into the ground, saving it for periods where there's less precipitation. Some places have more precipitation, some places less, depending on the time of year. And so it's helping to prevent all that water from just rushing out and flowing out of the river and be gone. It keeps it on the land longer. Another important thing that beaver dams do is they decrease peak flows of heavy storm runoff. Those dams, each one of them holding back a little, it creates sponge effect where downstream doesn't get the surges that can happen on the Farm River and many other water bodies when we get these big storm events. So the more beaver dams that are upstream in those headwaters helps protect everyone downstream. Fires out west, a huge issue. And what we'll see in this next slide is pretty dramatic how a forest fire just ravaged the mountainsides, but in the valley where there's a series of beaver dams, it was wet enough that it didn't burn. And that does many things. It creates an oasis for animals that can move to escape the fire and then spread out later. But it also does things for downstream. After a forest fire, a lot of ash starts running down in the rainstorms and into the streams and rivers. And these beaver dams, just like with erosion and soil sediment, help to trap a lot of that ash and help protect the water quality downstream. And by having this oasis, we're, ideally preventing a loss of a lot of different species that would have been completely wiped out had that been a dry area. And finally, this is what kind of hooked me on beavers is the biodiversity aspect. Beavers are called by biologists a keystone species. And that word's taken from the keystone of an arch, where the keystone at the top, you remove that and the whole arch collapses. Well, if you take a keystone species out of the landscape, the whole ecosystem collapses. And that's very true with beavers. When these dams that they build and the ponds support huge variety of plants, insects, and animals. And even after beavers leave and it drains out and becomes a grassy meadow, and then successive plants, bushes, and trees come back, at each of those stages, there are different species that rely on those habitats. So it's not just the beaver pond and what we see then, it's all the other species that rely on those successional habitats that are there because of beavers. Otherwise, it would have just been a solid forest with a little stream running through it, which is nice, but it doesn't support as much life as when beavers come involved. You know, here's a picture where beavers flooded an area in the town of Billerica, and people often see the dead trees and think, oh, that's, you know, if they're not aware enough, they think that's a bad thing. But it really is, I hit that by mistake. You know, there's a lot of benefits for, you know, bees and herons. You can see the nest or osprey and other birds. And, you know, beaver ponds are a great place for bird watching, as well as, you know, all the other nature. So that, you know, that's really one of the greatest satisfactions I have doing this work, is that it's not just about keeping the beavers around, it's all the other species that depend on it. It's all the ecological benefits that come from just letting them do what they naturally do and have done for millions of years. So, you know, this is an interesting fact, acre for acre. You know, these beaver ponds are equal to coral reefs and rainforests and the biodiversity they support. And most people don't know that. And we all know how important coral reefs and rainforests are, but these are ours. They're in our backyard, and they deserve to be treated just as valuably. But there's always a but, right? But beavers can cause problems. So I'm going to briefly go through some of the problems and how we manage them, just so you have an overview of beaver management. Because fortunately, even though they want to change and flood everything out if they can, we have ways that we can mitigate that and find a balance. So there's a variety of problems that we see with beavers, and basically any human land use that's in the low-lying area, that basically a floodplain that is prone to flooding is good beaver habitat, and we can see conflicts arise. So the non-lethal options we have are very effective, so much so that when we install one of our devices, you know, we're able to guarantee it. The flow devices I'm going to talk about ultimately are the best way to manage conflicts, because they end up saving not just environmental interests, but time and money too, as we'll see shortly. And they'll work for years and years. There are times we have to remove the beavers, but then we're usually going back within a year or two when new beavers move in and recreate the same problem. So real quickly, I'm going to go over 4 types of flow devices that we use, the 4 most common. The first one's a pond leveler pipe, and that's used to control water level at a freestanding beaver dam. And here's a diagram of it. Basically, a pipe is put through a trench in the dam, and the height of the pipe controls the level of the pond. So we set that wherever we need the water to be at, and the intake end is protected with fencing. That fencing is big enough where it keeps the beavers far enough away that they don't feel or hear water going into the pipe, and they'll leave it alone. And we build it on land, we float it out on temporary pontoons, and then sink it in a deep spot and lay the pipe into a trench that we'll dig down to the level we need the water. Then we'll cover it up with fencing and mud, and basically create a permanent leak through the dam that the beavers can't detect. And so that's for freestanding dams. The most common problem we see is road culverts. I think beavers look at a road culvert basically a pipe under a road, as a hole in the dam. The road bed looks like a perfect dam, and they're smart enough that they know with a little bit of work plugging that pipe, the whole road becomes a dam, and it's not much work for them to create a big pond. But a plug culvert can quickly become a serious issue. So we have to make sure that we're proactive and protect these culverts. But fortunately, it's rare that we can't protect a road culvert from beavers. One way we'll do it is putting fencing on it. And that basically turns what's the easiest place for the beavers to dam into the hardest. And so they have to dam around, 30, 40 feet of fence instead of a 2, 3, 4 foot wide culvert. And so they'll typically choose not to do that and dam upstream or downstream in the channel where they can just dam straight across. That may or may not be an issue, but the important thing is that the infrastructure is protected, and we can then have more time if there is a dam that's a problem to manage that. So these fences are, they do need to be cleaned. We'll talk about the maintenance later. It's pretty easy, but typically less than an hour per year to maintain these. And we like to put passageways in them for wildlife and for beavers. Beavers have a unique trait that they don't like to take damming materials from the water up onto land and then back down into the culvert, but they'll travel through that without sticks and damming materials all the time. So it's a nice way to try to make sure we don't force animals, turtles, and others up over the road, that they can still travel through the culvert. Here's an example. Hopefully I can get this to play right. Yeah, here's a beaver going through one of the wildlife passages, and this I'm showing this because there's a cool little thing that comes up in a moment I want to show you. So we caught on the camera this that beaver came back and is being followed by a very young beaver kit, and you can see kind of the challenging. It was kind of difficult for that little guy to get down, right? This shows you how beavers are problem solvers. Let's see what happened the next day. It took a ride. So pretty cool. I've never seen that before. So, but beavers have no problems navigating these, and so it is a nice way to allow for wildlife passage. The third device is a fence and pipe system. That's what we were just looking at with that wildlife passage video. Basically, we build a small fence knowing that the beavers can dam on it, and then we run a pond level pipe through it. The times we'll use this is when we can have a spot where we can tolerate at least 3 feet of water out by the intake of our pipe, because we need that amount of depth for the beavers not to discover the flow. And if we have that depth, this is nice because then the beavers will dam on our fence, they'll have their pond, and we don't have to worry about them damming in upstream or downstream. And the height of this pipe is controlling the level of the ponding. So here's an example where we had a deeper water area, and the pond, here's the intake of the pipe out in the water, and then you can see how the beavers dam on the fence. But if we had a big storm, that would just go up and over that damming and through a culvert that's completely open, and that pipe just discharges into that open culvert. And so this is probably one of our favorite ways to protect a culvert, because the beavers have their dam, create their little pond, but we're limiting it so abutters aren't negatively affected. And you would think that, even though beavers can travel through here and they hear all this noise, that they would just dam right here. And I hope I'm not jinxing myself, but we've had a device here for about 15 years and haven't had, we don't typically see that. So the last one I want to go over is what we call a decoy dam. This is kind of opposite of the culvert fence, where instead of creating a fence that we are discouraging beavers from damming, we're actually encouraging them to dam out in front of the culvert, usually about 10 feet in front. We'll use this in an area where the only goal is to keep the culvert open. And here's a 12-foot culvert. Beavers were damming repeatedly. We put a little fence out here, and the beavers dammed on it, as you can see, and then created this massive wetland. But fortunately, there's no issues anywhere around the perimeter of it, and it's hard to see, but over here there's a path. The beavers have been going through this culvert, frequently, but have left it alone because they're happy. They've got their pond up here. So when in the right spot, it's nice to be able to use this. Here's a place in Western Mass where the pipe had been plugged for a long time. The highway department opened it up. We put this fence here and put some of the sticks on there to get them started. And within 2 weeks, they had it all dammed up on the fence, but the culvert's open. So if we get a big storm, it goes up and over that dam through the unblocked culvert. The roadbeds hide it high enough, and there's no abutters where this pond is any issue. So, and there's no maintenance. This is just a naturalized beaver dam, but now it's in a location where it's not causing us trouble. So in my experience, 3 out of 4 calls we get, we can manage with these devices, but 1 out of 4 times, there's just no room for the beavers to have pond without people being negatively affected. And in those cases, we'll recommend removing the beavers. It's always a last resort, but it is a necessary tool sometimes just because of the way we've developed some floodplains. So some of the times we won't recommend it is, development in a floodplain, but also if it's a very high flow stream, where we can't have big enough pipes to handle the flow most of the time. Drainage ditches and canals are tough because you put a pipe through a beaver dam, but it's a narrow, uniform channel, so they can just build behind it and reflood it, and learn that the hard way. You just chase them down the ditch, and sometimes in public water supplies they don't want beavers either. Trapping, as I mentioned, is a necessary tool. Sometimes there are areas where this was a small beaver dam of about 2 feet tall, and yet it flooded this person's backyard, and there's a septic system under that water. So, we just can't have that. And it's unfortunate because the beavers don't know the difference. It's just a habit. They're just following their instincts in the normal habitat of the stream, but it's, they have to be trapped out. Success rates of these devices versus trapping. When we trap, we're usually going back to the same place every year or two. So it doesn't take, and that's represented by the blue line, whereas the water control devices typically last about 10 years or so before the fencing needs to be replaced. And so long as someone's keeping an eye on them, they typically will remain very effective for many years. We did a 19-year study in the town of Billerica, Mass, with 55 conflict sites. And this showed that not only were using flow devices better ecologically, but the taxpayers were saving $180 per year per site that we were able to use these devices. As you can see, 12 sites we had to trap because they just weren't going to be feasible for the devices. So when you annualize it, even though it's a little more upfront, the cost versus trapping ends up being good for using the flow devices. If someone's a licensed trapper themselves, then obviously the cost is going to be skewed, but in general, hiring someone to remove the beavers. And, that's a cost for all those devices I showed you, depending on the site. The maintenance depends on the device, but 1 to 4 times they need to be checked. Usually only takes 5 to 10 minutes, 15 minutes each site. And so generally less than an hour per year for any of these devices. Ones that we install, we offer the maintenance at a contract and we can guarantee that they'll remain effective. But the maintenance is pretty easy and anyone can do it. So I'm going to, hopefully you
We
can
know
hear
that
this.
rainforests and coral reefs are critical in sustaining the health of our planet. In North America, beaver ponds are equally as valuable. Beaver wetlands serve as a haven for native species, a refuge for biodiversity to recover and expand. They save endangered species, store water, decrease wildfire damage, sequester carbon, and clean the water in our rivers, streams, and bays. Your local beaver pond is your rainforest, your coral reef. Join us in protecting and expanding them.
Yeah, so we offer training to do this work through the Beaver Institute, and if you check on our website, you can find information on that. In fact, Diane Honer, who I'm going to mention momentarily, has gone through our training and is working out of Chester, Connecticut. But those are the websites for both the Beaver Institute and my company, Beaver Solutions. And I highly recommend Diane. If and when beavers show up and there's a problem, she's a great resource. And she's also a wildlife rehabilitator, and so can't recommend her enough. So, in summary, we've learned about some of the basics of beavers, how they've been around so long, how they pretty much disappeared for short couple hundred years from Connecticut and most of New England and actually across the country. But they're back, and thank goodness, because of all the benefits they have, both for biodiversity and climate issues, as far as protecting us from storm surges and cleaning the water and cooling it. So we want to be able to keep them around whenever we can, but obviously there are times when we butt heads with them and have differing opinions about how that land should look. And fortunately, most of the time, we can find that middle ground where they can stay, do their thing, and our infrastructure or properties are protected. And I showed you the website for Beaver Institute, Beaver Solutions, and with Diane, Beaver and Wildlife Solutions. So with that, I will stop sharing and open it up to any questions or comments.
So Mike, I did want to ask a question about this area. I guess if you were in the Farm River and there are not beaver on it currently, and if their beaver began to show up and you were some kind of a town manager, how would you approach the whole situation? Do you typically wait and see if a problem arises, or do you guys sometimes do preemptive work to protect infrastructure, or how does it usually work out?
Yeah, good question. Well, human nature is usually wait until there's a crisis and then deal with it, right? But whenever we can be proactive, that's generally will be in our best interest. So we have created beaver management plans for some municipalities, for example, and we do the beaver control work for National Grid and have a plan for them, as well as working for like Mass DOT and others. So we do have plans that we work with certain clients with. In general though, you can, once beavers are in an area, you can almost predict where they're going to dam because they're going to go after the spots that with the least amount of work give them the biggest dam. And so that's why with our work with Beaver Solutions, I would say about 60% of it is for local and state highway departments. So that kind of infrastructure protection makes a lot of sense. What's interesting, and I didn't mention this in the talk, is that when we install these fences or fence and pipes on road culverts, they have an unintended benefit, which is to protect the road from catastrophic flooding. And when we had Hurricane Sandy come up the coast and through Western Mass and into Vermont, there were tons of roads that were wiped out in the Berkshires. And the next day, when I went out and started checking sites, not one of the sites that had one of our devices on it was washed out. And while that's not a guarantee or anything, and we don't advertise that, it was a side benefit because what happened is these fences acted as debris catchers, so that when all the sticks and materials that the floodwaters were carrying down didn't clog up the entrance of the culvert. Instead, they were kept a little far ways away, and then the water went up and over and through the unblocked culvert, just like our fence and pipe systems are designed. Now, they did clog all up, and some of them got a little damaged, but the ultimate, like one site I was at, there was water going over the road, but the culvert was open, was blasting. It was just that there was just so much water. So, with these storms becoming more and more common with the changing precipitation patterns, that is a side benefit to these. So, getting more back to your question, any site where there are beavers nearby, it's a good idea to proactively do something with road culverts in particular.
Yeah. I'll have one more question, then open it up, which is nutrient reduction. Do you have information on your site, or perhaps you've read enough about it, about the studies that have been done? Because I understand there have been studies done in some locations about the potential nutrient reduction that's been achieved when you've had a series of beaver dam installed.
Yeah. Yeah. As far as nutrient reduction, there definitely is a significant drop in nitrogen, phosphorus that go through beaver ponds. So much so that, and there are studies on the Beaver Institute website in the library that people can refer to. I wish there were more, but there are enough where it's pretty compelling that this is a good thing. And because of that, the Chesapeake Bay folks and also people out in the Midwest are really looking at supporting more beaver damming for those reasons, because they're trying to lower, particularly Chesapeake Bay is very closely monitored, and a lot of efforts are put in to decrease the nutrient load in the bay. And there's a restoration company, Ecotone, that was pioneering that work down in Maryland and in that area. So yeah, when the beaver dams slow the water, what happens, in a lot of biological processes start happening. For example, the tree canopies open, so sun's hitting the surface of water. You'll see duckweed and algae growing, and and other aquatic plants, and those start absorbing a lot of the nutrients, and also the sedimentation is going to trap, heavy metals in some. So, that's not an area of expertise of mine, but that's, my understanding of some of the ways that it'll help, take that stuff out of the water.
Thank you. Open it up for questions from the audience.
There's a few in the chat.
Okay,
Pop
there's some
up.
in the chat. Great.
Chat questions.
All right.
Scroll down. We've got right here, Dave and Yope.
Okay, so Dave Tobin asked, what's done with the water chestnut that's been removed? That's a really interesting question. We've been able to land base it, and actually it composts like incredibly quickly. It composts within 2 months. So this year we took it out, and last year we took it out, and we brought both samples from last year. In other words, a 14-month-old pile of composted material and a 2-month-old pile of composted material to the ag station to have it analyzed for nutrient values. And not surprisingly, it is very high in nitrogen and phosphorus. It appears to be a very, very good soil additive. An advantage is once you get those thorny little chestnuts out, there's no way that, first of all, they're gonna take on land, but they're a pain in the neck, and you don't want to be putting them in your garden. But once you get those out, there's no weed seed in it. So it's not like some of the other compost that you buy where you put it in your garden, you're going to start getting weed seed. So it's got promise as a soil additive. So that's my quick question there. Okay. Dave Tillman asked, do beaver tolerate any degree of brackish water? And in the Farm River, we are only salty for maybe the first 3/4 mile, and it's a 14-mile long stream. So the vast majority of it is fresh. But go ahead, Mike.
They can tolerate it, but it's not preferred. So I've seen situations where they've been in tidal areas, but it's I think that's more a function of areas that have a high population of beavers, and so they're moving into more marginal habitats. But they also have been well documented swimming in the ocean, traveling, because what'll happen is beaver kits, once they become 2 years old, they sexually mature and they will start exploring to find a mate and find habitat where there aren't other beavers. So they will travel upstream, downstream until they can find an area that doesn't have other beavers, because beavers are territorial. So they need to find suitable habitat that doesn't have beavers. So they may move into brackish area, but it's going to be a function more of the food supply. And if they have, adequate vegetation that they can subsist on.
Okay, great. Yoke Verkamp has a question. Do beavers have natural enemies?
Oh yeah. The biggest one is us. But historically, they evolved because of predators to build these dams. So mountain lions, wolves, coyotes might be able to get a small one, but there isn't much for predators for them now. And so there's been so a question becomes, well, what's going to control their population? Don't we have to take the place of the predators that were just, they're gone, and control their population ourselves? And there's a really good study it's ongoing for over 50 years at the Quabbin Reservoir in Massachusetts. And there's no trapping allowed in that area, and they've been monitoring the beaver population that whole time, and it fluctuates, but generally it doesn't follow like a typical predator prey curve where the prey goes up, then the predators go up, because they're isolated to themselves really and rely on the vegetation of the habitat. So they have kind of a self-regulating population and breeding based on their food supply. If they have a lot of food, they'll have larger litters per year. Typically, they'll have 1 to 6 kits per year, born at end of May, beginning of June in our area. And if food's scarce, they may have 1 or 2. And so it's yeah, there's not much for natural predators now, but it's kind of funny how their population is self-regulating.
If I
Mike, I'll
could
just
if I could
go ahead.
follow up on that, if you don't mind. So one of my interests is the pre-colonial beaver population, and we can say that, say 20,000 years ago, there were 0 beavers on the land because it was all covered with ice. So we had no beavers. And that means in 20,000 years, they allowed to build up a population between 20 and 200 million beavers in Canada and the US, in the Northern American continent, which is a rate of population which is very close, of the same order of magnitude as humans. We're living here with 300 million people, and we started with a few people who landed here. And so there I was wondering, indeed, that population was not kept in control by some big predator. They were extremely successful, one could argue. You got any ideas about this?
Yeah, I mean thank you. While you were talking, it made me think of out west, there's a lot of interest in having more beavers because they have a lot of arid areas and they're trying to hold onto the water with less snow melt in the spring and the wildfires and all that. And so there are some states where it's legal to relocate beavers, and what they're finding is that because there are predators and mountain lions and wolves in a lot of these areas, that about half of the beavers that they translocate don't survive, probably from predation. So when there is a small population, the predators can have a significant impact on the establishment of a beaver population. But when it's a robust population, it seems to be less of an issue, but hard to say. If I don't know if that answers what you were asking.
Right. So that's, but still, I think there is a question how they became so incredibly successful, and that is my other question. There are people who think that beavers are incredibly intelligent. They got a very tiny brain volume, and so that's a bit of a question. And so besides the beaver ponds, they also create channels and canals between various beaver ponds, and so their infrastructure modification of the landscape is actually more than just the individual ponds, and part of their social life is that they go from one pond to the other. And so some people have said that the sum of their intelligence is much larger than simply adding up what every single beaver can do, somewhat comparable to like what are those ants called that built the giant ant hills, were which are 1,000 to 10,000 times taller than every individual beastie. When they're working on it, they don't know what they're working on, but they're building those things all together. And I thought that would be a nice parallel. That I mean, we are the biggest landscape modifiers in the world, of course, but there are people who said a close second is the beaver, because it modified the whole scope of the landscape and the drainage. And so I think that's, and so there are people who call pre-colonial America Beaverland because they were the landscape modifiers, and we have taken that role over. But I think that's fascinating. The IQ of a beaver. What can we think about that?
Yeah. Yeah, well, in my experience, they can problem solve, like that little kit did and is taking a ride down in the tail. But a lot of that, what they do does seem to be instinctual, and there does seem to be, or there is variation between beavers. Like some sites we'll go to and will put in a device and then they'll do everything they can think of to try to undo what we did. And then other sites, it's like, okay, whatever, then so so there's yeah, the intelligent, I mean, we should be able to outthink them, right? Our brains are a little bigger. It seems like, but what they have on their side certainly is perseverance, because they're there 24/7, no holidays, no weekends, and all they're interested is maintaining, that habitat for their own needs. So it's that's one of the things I like about doing this work because it's a challenge. Sometimes it feels like a chess match where we do one thing, they try something else, and so it's yeah, the intelligence. I'm sure it varies, well, just like humans, I suppose. Changes from individual to individual, but they definitely have some, cognitive problem solving skills.
Questions from our audience here? Yes, Lauren.
Can you hear me?
Maybe you should come up. Yeah, if you have a question, come on up and talk right into it.
Hey, Mike, great
Hi.
presentation. I'm
Thanks.
curious, are there any laws to introducing beavers to an area? Like I know you've said that they're in Massachusetts, they're probably in places in Connecticut, but if we don't have them here, like how do we get them here? Are there methods?
They'll find you.
Oh, okay. So
If you have the habitat, they will come. It's just a matter of time. So they will travel overland, so they can get from one watershed to another, or as we talked earlier, they can travel along the coast and find a new river. But I am surprised that no one's aware of them in that watershed because we've done work all around there. So surrounding, towns surrounding your watershed have beavers. So it's just a matter of time, I think. And it is, I'll touch briefly on the relocation. Out west, I mentioned it's legal in many states. On the East Coast, it isn't because for a variety of reasons. And it actually makes sense. For one thing, they don't want people moving an animal that might cause a problem for a different landowner. And they also, while it's less of an issue with beavers, state biologists don't want animals being moved that could have a disease and spread a disease. And with beavers, there's an extra reason, which is beavers are territorial. So they won't let beavers outside their family into their ponded area because they want to protect the vegetation that's their food. And so that's one time beavers will get aggressive is if another beaver comes into their territory, they will chase them. We've even seen scars on beavers because those 2-year-olds are moving out trying to find a habitat. And if they go through an occupied area, they better keep moving or they won't have a pleasant greeting. And beavers put up warning signs. They have an castor oil that has a unique scent to them, and they will mix that oil in mud and leaves and leave little mounds called scent mounds around the perimeter of their ponds, and that's to warn any non-family members that this area is taken.
Interesting. One other question, do beavers eat Phragmites?
I wish. I wish. There would be such a push for more beavers if they could eat Phragmites or other invasives. Yeah. But it's
They're too smart.
yeah, just like other species, they didn't evolve with it and they're not inclined to eat it.
Well, thank you. Well, we have to clean Farm River to attract more beavers, it seems.
Yeah.
Other questions from our audience here? Yeah, come on up.
Hi, I'm wondering what mammal I might have seen swimming in the Farm River if it wasn't a beaver.
It
Do
could
do mink swim? And I'm wondering if it was just a rat.
um, yeah, it's almost impossible to distinguish a muskrat from a beaver when it's swimming. Muskrats, though, are a little smaller, unless you
Yes.
see its tail. The muskrat obviously has a rat-like tail, whereas the beavers have this big paddle type tail.
Mhm.
So if you see that, then obviously that's you know what it is. But yeah, mink will swim. Otters, will swim and maybe could be mistaken, because it's furred animals out in the water. But the most common animal that's mistaken for a beaver is a muskrat.
Thank you. That was in
Yep.
the Farm River, just maybe half a mile north of Page's Mill Pond.
Well, I
And
hope it
prob
wasn't mistakenly identified and it really was a beaver. You
That
never
would be
know.
great.
Yeah.
Thanks.
One of the questions that has occurred to me is from if we were to make the Farm River more friendly to beaver, is willow sort of restoration a significant help to beaver?
Yeah.
In other words,
Yeah.
planting.
Yeah,
And
willow is like candy for beavers. Poplar also, but willow has the wonderful advantage of coppicing. So when it's cut down, it'll then send up a bunch of different shoots, and also when it's cut, if some of those cuttings float downstream, it'll self-root and also start growing and generally grows fast and thick. So willow is a common way where when people are making an area that they want beavers to move into, they'll put in. Another option is water lilies. Water lilies grow even faster, and the tubers on water lilies can sustain a beaver all winter long, even if the pond's frozen
Wow.
over.
Wow.
And during the summer, they'll eat the stems and the leaves. They'll roll the leaf up. Their hands are very dexterous, like they'll roll it up like a cigar and just munch it down. So the yeah, so those are two quick growing plants that can provide real preferred food for beavers.
Yeah,
You see that a lot at Supply Pond, so surprised we don't see them there.
a lot of willow.
Oh, no,
No.
water lilies.
Water lilies, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, maybe they haven't been there. Other questions? David Perkins, you've had a little experience with beaver. Dave is also the inland wetlands officer for our town that I'm standing in right now, North Branford. I don't know if you have any questions or observations in your time with beaver, Dave?
I've had a lot of experience with beavers from what I like to call beaver deceivers. Mike, that might be a brand name, but we've installed those in a number of towns. I've also watched a beaver pond in Western Massachusetts develop from becoming a beaver pond to the beavers actually using up the pond and the pond turning back into a field, a whole progression, and watched all those children move on downstream and create more dams downstream. If you could talk a little bit about the lifestyle of beavers and their houses and how they live and what it's like to be a beaver from day to day.
As best I can, not being a beaver, but being a voyeur. Yeah, so beavers it's a good question because beavers have a very interesting social life. monogamous for life, the mating pair, and then each year they'll have offspring, as I mentioned, one to six usually. And the 1 year olds will they'll wrestle in the water and stuff like that, but the beavers actually teach the younger beavers how to build dams. Now, a beaver kit that was orphaned that had no beaver to train it will still have this instinct to build a dam, but the dam it builds is not very good. Whereas beavers that have grown up in the family unit and watched and learned from their older siblings and parents are much better dam builders once they move out on their own to do that. So, it typically will only be one breeding female in a pond. As I mentioned earlier, how they're territorial. And when the younger beavers um, get sexually mature around age 2, sometimes 3, but usually 2, they'll move out. And so there's generally no more than the parents and 2 generations of beavers in any one pond. But they are very social. They groom each other. And as you can imagine, any animal that, because beavers don't hibernate in the winter, when the ponds freeze over solid, they are stuck in their lodge all winter long and without seeing the light of day. So they will store sticks at the bottom of the pond. They'll swim out, grab a stick, bring it back in to eat, or a tuber from a cattail or a water lily. But they're basically pent up in a dark room with all their family members all winter long. So they better be social or they're going to kill each other, right? I don't know many human families that could go 3 months in a dark room together and still come out the other side. But
And they all live in one house together, or they're
typically,
separate houses in one pond?
often you'll see more than one lodge in one pond because they will build a lodge close to their food supply, and then if those trees or food's depleted, they often will build another lodge somewhere else closer to a different food supply. I've read that when the female is about giving birth and shortly thereafter, after she gives birth, that the adult male won't be around. He'll take off and hang out in the bachelor lodge that's abandoned.
That's what I've heard.
I,
Man cave, the beaver
yeah,
cave.
the beaver man cave. Yeah. Uh, so, uh, so, but one way to tell if a lodge is occupied is this time of year, they'll start insulating it by packing mud on it. I, I don't know if everyone's seen it, but there's 2 type of lodges. One is out in the water and it's conical shaped, and that's what they'll start insulating with the mud that they dig up from the pond bottom and they'll leave a little area of the sticks unmudded at the top so they can exchange air. And then the other type of lodge is in like rivers where they're not going to be able to build something that's going to get washed away. They'll burrow into the embankment and create a hollowed out area that they can live in above the river level. So there's 2 different types of housing that they'll make for themselves.
Um, I think we pretty much have to wrap up. I am curious, though, I'm looking at my friend from the Regional Water Authority. You mentioned that water supplies often have trouble, but isn't there an advantage to, as you said, to groundwater infiltration, improving groundwater infiltration, which I would assume for some public drinking water supplies that are using groundwater would be actually an advantage to have beaver in the landscape. Because,
Yeah.
if I'm reading the tea leaves right, and you correct me if I'm wrong, I believe there's both some groundwater wells that we get public supply from, up on the Farm River, but also obviously Salt and Stull, which is a big impoundment as well. So, yeah, and we're seeing a yes to those. Go ahead.
Yeah. So yeah, one comment about that. It's I'm not sure in Connecticut, in Massachusetts, I was referring to open water reservoirs, and there's actually not good science for this, but they're concerned beavers can carry two intestinal parasites, Cryptosporidium and Giardia. And Giardia in particular is very difficult to get out of a water supply. And the problem is that beavers aren't the only mammal, humans and many other mammals, muskrats, even wading birds can carry Giardia. But because beavers can, and there have been a couple publicized cases of beaver fever got tabbed, that when beavers moved into an open water reservoir, that people get nervous and they have them trapped out. But interestingly, generally beavers catch it from humans, whether like a septic system that gets flooded or campers not disposing of waste properly. And then it gets in the water, they pick it up, and it doesn't take much. It takes like 10 microscopic cysts to cause an infection. So it is a serious problem if it gets into the water supply.
Okay, thank you. One question. Yeah, how big is the territory for a pair of a beaver, and does most of it have to do with food supply?
The food supply is a big part of it. Also, the topography and the grade. Beavers prefer flatter, lower areas where like a dam can back up water a long ways. But if it's a mountain stream going up a hill, they're not going to they may make some dams to access trees and whatnot, but they're not going to spread out as much. So, typically you can estimate a beaver colony will occupy one family, maybe a half mile of stream, plus or minus, depending on the topography.
Great. Well, Mike, this has been a fabulous evening with you. I want to thank you on behalf of our whole audience for being with us. And Friends of the Farm River will send, as I mentioned before, a donation to you and the Beaver Institute. So, and I would just say this for people who are leaving, if you're interested in either part of the rapid response team or just getting more information, do sign up and give us either a chat or sign up next to your name. And we're also always interested in people helping organize the dance this March, right, Heather? So anyway, thank you very much, Mike. Really great
Thank you all.
presentation.
I appreciate it. All right. Good night, everyone.